Hi, third graders. So this week is going to be all about shapes and classifying shapes. So there is still a lot of vocabulary that goes along with classifying shapes. So I want to go through some of those terms with you. We'll do some examples together, and then once you get back onto the Google Doc, there will be slides for you to do your own independent practice. So before you even move any further, just make sure you have a pencil to write with, or like a whiteboard and an expo marker, because I will have you draw some examples of your own. So, okay, first terms that we're going to start with is very simple, a ray. So a ray is part of a line. It has one endpoint and it can go on forever in one direction. That is a ray. So when I describe that to you, now we're going to draw one. A ray is very simple, so we're going to draw a ray. So sticking with that definition, if it is just part of a line, has one endpoint and it goes on forever. So all that is, it's just kind of a line. It's got its one endpoint. It can go on forever in one direction. So by drawing like the edges of the arrow, that's how we know this ray can go on forever in one direction and never stops. That is a ray. So if you want to draw one on your own, you can do that as well. Any of the vocab that I go over with you in this video, I also have it posted on the Google Doc, so like you can reference it. You don't have to come back to this video. All right, the next term we are going to talk about is an angle. So an angle is actually two line segments or rays that meet at an endpoint. So that's two line segments or rays. I drew the ray for you and they meet at an endpoint. So now on your paper, go ahead and draw an angle, any type of angle. So here's my one endpoint, and I now need to make two line segments. One line segment, two line segments, and they meet at one endpoint. So here is my angle. If you drew a larger angle, maybe yours was a little bit wider, this is also an angle too. Or maybe you drew one that was really small. I'll erase this a little bit better. This is also an angle. Okay, there's different kinds of angles, and this is going to kind of segue into our first shape that we're going to learn about, which is triangles. A right angle. So a right angle, this forms a square corner. So this is a specific type of angle. So it has to meet and make a corner. So I'll start with my endpoint. There we go. And okay, it forms a square corner. That's how you know it's a right angle. As I'm drawing these, you can draw them out on your page as well as some practice. All right, and then there are two other types of angles. There are angles that are smaller than right angles. So we're going to draw an angle that is smaller than a right angle. I'm going to draw mine first, and then I'll show you. So while I'm drawing mine, you can go ahead and see if you can draw an angle that's smaller than a right angle. So hopefully you drew something like this. Still has your endpoint, has your two rays, they'll go on forever, and it's smaller than a right angle. So that right angle would meet up here. So we know that this angle is smaller than a right angle. Anywhere like in this vicinity would be smaller than a right angle. Okay, and then the last kind of angle we're going to draw is an angle that is larger than a right angle. Let me draw mine first. So I'm going to draw an angle that's larger than a right angle. While I'm doing that, you can draw an angle that you think would be larger than a right angle. So make sure you start with your endpoint. Oops. I'm gonna start mine over here. All right. So hopefully you made an angle that was really wide. It needs to be larger than a right angle. I had to move my end point because I had it way over here, and then I realized I didn't have enough room to make my angle. So larger than a right angle. Okay, so quick review. We talked about what a ray is. It has one end point, it's a line segment, and it goes on forever. We did angles, so those are 2 rays. And then there are 3 types of angles: right angles, larger than a right angle, and smaller than a right angle. Which leads us to triangles. So now we're going to draw triangles. We're going to draw triangles that have a right angle. We're going to draw triangles whose angles are smaller than a right angle. And then we're going to draw triangles that have an angle larger than a right angle. Lots of angles. So let's start with the right. Let's start with a right angle triangle, a right triangle. So I'm going to draw my right angle. I would start with something like this. And to make it a triangle, let's see if I can do this like upside down here. We have a right triangle. Still meets that square in the middle. Right triangle. It has a right angle and it's triangle. So it is a right triangle. When you're making right triangles, you definitely want to start with making the right angle first and then connecting it with that bigger, longer line. All right, this one we're going to do, we are going to make one that is smaller, has an angle that's smaller than a right angle. So I would start with the angle and then fill in that extra line. So I'm going to make my little small angle first. So I know I've at least got that shape. So I made my small angle. And to make it a triangle, I'm just going to connect it. So I made a triangle that has angles smaller than a right angle. This looks pretty close to a right angle here, but if we were to measure it, hopefully it would still classify as smaller than a right angle. I think it my line dips just slightly in, so it fits our category. All right, and then we're going to do one more. Now we're going to make our triangle that has an angle larger than a right angle. So I'm going to pop my end point right in the middle because I need a lot of room for that wide angle. Okay, I've got my large angle, and then I'm going to connect them. And now I have a triangle larger than a right angle. And those are the 3 types of triangles. When we're classifying shapes and we're classifying triangles, it's all about their angles and sides. So right triangles, right angles, smaller than right angles, and larger than right angles. There are some names for those triangles, but we don't need to worry about those names just yet. Okay, we're almost finished here. So triangles and their angles. We also have to look at triangle sides. So they can have equal sides where the sides are all equal. They're all equal lengths, perfectly equal lengths. There are triangles whose sides have two of their sides are equal lengths. And then there are triangles that none of their sides are equal. So we'll draw some examples of those. Okay, so we'll start with our equal sides triangle. So when you make your lines, even if you're just free drawing it, try to make them as close to equal as possible. So here's what I drew. Looks pretty close. All my sides, when I drew them, I made sure that nothing was like really large or really small. They all came out to be about the same size. If you see on any of your assignments or like a homework or remembering page and you see these lines, they tell you that yes, those sides are equal. So I don't need to do any measuring. If I see this in my book, I'm like, yep, that's an equilateral triangle. All sides are equal. All right, the next one we're going to draw is a triangle that has 2 sides that are of equal length. So I'm going to draw my 2 sides first. And I'm going to kind of make some really long sides. And then that way I know my bottom side here, when I connect them, that one is like visually, it definitely looks a little bit shorter. So here's my two sides that are equal, and then my bottom side is not. So two sides are equal. And again, when you see these lines, if you were to see them on a math page, you know that those sides are equal. You do not need to measure. It's telling you they're equal. And the last type of triangle, sometimes none of the sides are of equal length. So I'm going to draw out like a really long line. Then I'm going to draw like a short line. Then I'm going to draw another really long line. And as I'm drawing that, I think I need to extend one of my lines a little more. Kind of talking through this as I'm doing it. Okay, there we go. So now, when I look at this triangle, none of my sides, this kind of looks more like a triangle this way, none of the sides are equal length. No sides equal. And there's no little hash marks, so that also tells me, nope, none of these sides are equal. Okay? All right, and then some other shapes and vocab you're going to see are polygons. Polygons are just flat closed shapes. And the way they can be broken down is they can be concave or convex. So those are some vocab words that may have popped up on the Math Spelling City vocab. Concave, it actually kind of means the way it sounds. It means like there's like a cave almost, I guess, right? Like in the shape, you could draw a line right through it like that. I'm going to pull this up closer to my screen here so you can see it. And convex, it's pointing out. So that's the difference between those. We're going to come over here and we're going to circle the polygons. So a polygon again needs to be a flat closed shape. So we'll go through shape by shape. First one here, is this a flat closed shape? That would be a true statement. I'm going to check that one off. That is a polygon. I'm going to check them rather than circle. Okay, I'm going to come to this shape here. So is this a flat closed shape? It is not, because they have lines that are crossing through it. So it's not a flat closed shape. It's got crisscross lines through it. What about this? Flat closed shape, is it a polygon? This one is a polygon. It fits, it's a flat closed shape. And what about this one here? This one is a polygon. It fits our description, our flat closed shape. All right. And what about this one? Little funky looking, but it is still a flat closed shape. And then this one might look familiar. If you see this, you might think, oh, it's a trapezoid. So yes, that is a flat closed shape. And then our bottom two here, they are not closed shapes. So these are not polygons. Okay. And then down here, I just drew out some other examples. So they could be funky looking shapes like some of these. They're still polygons, flat closed shapes. All right, and then the last, I feel like this is like a fully loaded lesson here today. There are different types of polygons besides just being a flat closed shape that you might be familiar with. So those would be, I webbed them out for you, and then also this is on the Google Doc that you'll click back to after watching this video. So we have triangles. They have 3 sides. If you have a 4-sided shape, it's a long word. That is a quadrilateral. Then we're going to go down here. 5 sides. That is a pentagon. 6-sided shapes is a hexagon. If it has 6 sides, it's a hexagon. Then we're going to skip through. If it has 7 sides, there is a name for a 7-sided shape. We're just going to go on to octagons, though. An 8-sided shape is an octagon. And then a 10-sided shape we call a decagon. So we have triangles, quadrilaterals, pentagon, hexagon, octagon, decagon. And as the shapes there are a few in between, and then there are even shapes that go even bigger. They get, like, once you get more than 10 sides, these shapes will start to look more and more like a circle. Got a truck outside my house. If you hear some noise in the background, sorry about that. But the more sides a shape has, it's going to get closer to looking like a circle. That's what I wanted to say. So, okay, that is a quick run through of the vocabulary that you're going to see and some of the terms you'll need to know. And then there's also a practice for you back on the Google Doc, and that will get you started for today.